This episode is about the most important families in Kuttenberg in 1403, the time of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Real history, real figures, real Kuttenberg. Hello and welcome to my series Historical Context of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I am Kuttenberg Martin. I have a master's degree in history and I'm a surveyor of historical buildings. And of course, I'm a big patriot of Kutná Hora, or Kuttenberg, if you will. Because it's one of the most awesome towns in the world, full of history. This video will touch the year 1403 a lot. That's the year when Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 takes place. And Warhorse Studio, with no doubt, did a really historically accurate game, which means a lot of things I will be saying are going to be a part of a story. If you don't care about it, or you have already finished the game and you are just looking for some historical context, then feel free to continue. Otherwise, come back later. You can hit the subscribe button so you are reminded in case you forget about me. As I said in my other videos, there will not be much gameplay footage, because the game is not out yet. Anyway, let's start. And be careful, spoiler alert, it's about to get real. There were several major houses controlling Kuttenberg. In the pre-Hussite era, so before 1424, so at the time of the game, most of them were German, with one exception, which is Písek family. And it's just because we are not really sure what they were. But there were families where you can hear it from the name that they were German in origin, like Ruthard, Brevenbart, Wilman, Oderin, Rosenthal, and so on. So many of these families, and namely the ones I just mentioned, were in important positions around the time of the game, but they were in those positions already at the turn of 13th and 14th century, so 100 years before. Not continuously, with some gaps, but still. That's why I'm calling it patriciate, or you can call it oligarchy. So it was a well-established ruling class in the town, which controlled the town and politics of the town for generations. Now, let's imagine like these tech companies in 80s and 90s, like Apple, Microsoft, Google, and what have you. So these garage startups began as total nobodies, but now, a couple of decades later, they are controlling a huge chunk of this stock market pie. So similarly, you had these garage families who on the end of 13th century started in the mining and or processing business in Kuttenberg. Nobody from the big animals maybe gave them too much attention at the time, but over a couple of decades they grew from nothing into the most wealthy houses in the kingdom. And in 1403 they were wealthier than most of the nobility. Hell, remember KCD1? Well, Ruthard or Písek family could buy all the map from the first game if they decided to move from Kuttenberg, take all their wealth and settle somewhere else. So all the villages, Castle Starnberg, Rataj, Pirkstein, Sassau Monastery, they could buy that all. Probably would be close, but I think Ruthard and Písek family could do that. Now you may ask question, if those families were so filthy rich, how come they are just burghers and not a nobility? Well, first reason is obvious. Nobility was not very open to welcome everyone amongst themselves. But money can buy you everything, even a noble title. So the main reason is these families didn't want to become nobility. Why? To understand that, we have to really understand their business model. Mining and processing silver is a much different game than nobility's farming wheat, hunting rabbits and growing fish in ponds. Sure, it gives you a stable income at minimum risk, but it's kind of boring, like investing in bonds, if I stuck by this stock market analogies. On the other hand, here we have these sexy garage startups, as I call it. Silver business is extremely risky. You can easily lose everything, but if you are lucky, you hit a jackpot. The rewards are huge. And if luck is a factor in this business, you want to shape the luck your way as much as possible. Yeah, as nobility, you can influence big politics, kingdom affairs, which is great. But as an entrepreneur in the silver mining business, you want to influence politics on a level where it matters the most for you. And that's a town council of a mighty town of Kuttenberg, where you could really shape things your way. So that's why in 1403 all these wealthy families stayed burghers in Kuttenberg and did not pursue nobility title, because only as a burgher you can have a position in a town council and influence things your way. But there was one exception, and I will talk about it later in this video. Písek family. Name itself, Písek, means they were originally from town Písek. That's about 120 kilometers southwest from Kuttenberg. I called this segment the Písek family, but it's practically only about one person, and it's Peter Písek, most important person of this house ever. I imagine him as a godfather figure. Guy who at the time of the game is in his 60s, charismatic, powerful, respected. Everybody likes him, but also everybody in the back of their minds, they feared him a little. What if he comes to collect the favor I owe him? You know, this godfather stuff. Yeah, and of course he was probably trying to prepare his son for taking over his empire. Yeah, wonder who will be Fredo, right? So that's at least how I built the picture about him in my head. In the game he can be quite different, so don't put too much value in this my portrayal. Anyway, he owned several villages around Kuttenberg, most importantly Suchdol, the fort we saw in Trailers Under Siege. So that's Peter's Písek's Suchdol. He was on the side of King Wenceslas, obviously, so clearly as Henry he will be our most powerful ally in the game. Well, after Jobst of Moravia. But back to historical facts. Most important office he held was a position of mint master. He was in this position in years 1391 to 1399, so almost for a decade, and ended just 4 years before the game. Now, how to explain briefly who was this mint master? Well, let's say it was something like Minister of Finance and President of Central Bank. He was head of the Italian court, so someone who oversees all the money minting, coins minting, but also the mining operations. That was also under his jurisdictions to oversee if everything goes smoothly. Simply, this is the most important economical position in the kingdom. So let's say it that way. There is a lot to be told about Peter Písek. For example, how he contributed to construction of St. Barbara Cathedral. But yeah, I don't want to get stuck just by one person, and so let's move on to the second most influential family. So, Ruthard family. If I said about Peter Písek he's like a godfather, then Ruthards would be something like Harkonnens from Dune. Their legacy here in Kuttenberg is mildly said unflattering. In centuries to come, they are portrayed as greedy, cruel, just evil. There is even this horrifying legend about Rosina Ruthard. So, yeah, let me tell you real quick. I am now in a Ruthard's alley. So, here behind me was a place where once the Ruthard's house stood. Now there's no more, but you will see this house in a game. It's more like a palace. It's really awesome building. And the story about Rosa Ruthard goes like this. There was once a young and beautiful girl who everybody wanted to marry. But she had this really wealthy but greedy father. So Ruthard, in some places you can read his name was George. And he didn't want to pay her dowry, so pay some money for the wedding. And because he was so greedy, he invited a bricklayer to his house, took his daughter in a cellar and put a blindfold over this bricklayer eyes. And then the bricklayer heard how he tells his daughter, "Come here, my daughter, come to this room. This all silver will be your husband." Then the door closed, the Rosa screamed, and the George Ruthard told to this bricklayer to take off his blindfold and in front of the door build a wall. So he does that, and then after a while Rosa Ruthard dies in there. Then you hear the stories how she's walking around and she's scary and everything, and she puts a curse over the house. And then one day, all of a sudden, in year 1648, the house collapses and kills 15 inhabitants inside him. So that's why there is no house anymore. But we will see the house in a game. At least if it's the house I'm guessing it is. Alright, let's go back to a formed. Yeah, just this legend, it's again legend, so you can hear various versions of it. This one is actually from a menu of the restaurant, which is just here. It's called Ruthard Restaurant, so you can go grab a steak or burger if you are ever here. Anyway, let's go back to a formed of office. So that was a story time to paint you a picture how naughty this family was. So no wonder, from what I told you, I feel they will be our adversaries in the game. I honestly can't imagine it otherwise. But of course, from what we saw so far from the game, it can be otherwise. So don't hold me against it if I'm wrong. But yeah, let me tell you one interesting historical fact. Remember how I talked about the Kuttenberger entrepreneurs holding on their burgher status, not wanting to move up to nobility? Well, Ruthards made this leap. They really jumped to nobility. And what is even more fun about this fact is the first mention of their newly acquired status is in year 1403. So, well, I'll be damned if it's not somehow in the story. Like, they help Sigismund capture Kuttenberg and they will be rewarded, or something more fun, like they treacherously captured Peter Písek and deliver him to Sigismund. Well, I'm really thrilled to see how Warhorse will play this card. Anyway, back to topic at hand. Why would they change their minds and left burgher status for the nobility one? Well, first keep in mind, they were already in the mining business for more than a century. Remember the last videos I told you about the beef they had with the Lipa family back in 1309? They were already back then filthy rich. So they did what every investor guides tell you. Diversified. So they started to buy villages around Kutná Hora, and all of a sudden, a lot of these families, not just Ruthards, did that. They found themselves dealing in this traditional conservative business of nobility, so farming wheat, hunting rabbits and growing fish in ponds. And as I told you about Suchdol, which was the center of this domain of Písek family, well, non-Kuttenberg domain, they had of course property in Kuttenberg. Well, for Ruthards, that was village Malešov with its fort. They bought Malešov in 1364 from Sedlec monastery, and since then they started to build slowly but steadily their domain around it. I would like to point out that Malešov is another confirmed location from the game. We already saw some concept arts and screenshots, and definitely there will be things happening, story-wise. So, let's see how this all plays out when the game is out. By the way, from the first game, we know that Father Godwin is from some powerful house in Kuttenberg. Straightforward would be if he's from Písek family. We will be playing as him, defending Suchdol fort, which was owned by Peter Písek at the time, as I mentioned. So that would make sense. But I think an interesting twist would be that he is actually from House Ruthard. So it will be like this good son from the evil family. You know, I feel really classic Greek tragedy vibes in that. But that's just my speculation. We will see how it is in the game. Anyway, there were also another families like Nás, Odarin, owning villages around, villages we will probably see in the game. But I think we covered another huge chunk of history today, so let's wrap it up. Thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything out. Tell your friends, distant relatives, your dogs and cats about this channel. I would really appreciate it. And brace yourselves because in 3 weeks it will be here. So, thank you all for watching. See you next time. Bye.